Today, we're looking at one of the most overlooked roles in Football Manager 24, the Director of Football. If used correctly, it can be essential to be efficient in the game, to save you time, and most importantly, find some of the best players in the game. We've got 5 essential tips of how to maximize the Director of Football. Let's go. So the first tip, and this is going to be very simple, is making sure you hire the right director for your goals. Now, depending what you want them to do in your club, whether it's transfers, contract negotiations, these are the areas we're going to look at. So the standard for a director of football is ability, potential, and negotiating. Negotiating, if you are getting them to do contracts, it is essential to get a bit higher than this, for example. What ties in nicely to that is people management. If you can get them up high for this one, they are genuinely going to be working alongside those players and agents a lot better. Now, the most important part of this is getting that staff member in place first of all. As Man City, we're okay. We've got a brilliant director of football, but if you didn't, staff search, come in a staff role, we're looking at the recruitment team, director of football, and get them to pick the attributes quite simply, because it will already lean the 3 in there. If you do want some of the additional ones, as mentioned before, such as people management, click on that one, and then let's click on OK to see who actually comes up. Obviously nobody, so we'll drop it down to 3 or 4, maybe push it up to a 16, 17. I like to go as high as I can until you've still got a few options available. So the 2 available for us, and they do come up quite good. We've got the in-game editor, and just to show you the level of ability that's coming through, and Courtney Reeves, for example, potential of 175, looks to be a very good regen. And with people management, really high negotiating, this would be an improvement on what we currently have. Tip number 2, and that is to let them handle transfers, but with limits. That's the essential thing. So responsibilities, transfers and contracts. You can use a director of football to find some absolute stars for your club. And if you're doing it realistically, like you're the manager, this is a good way of doing this. We've just started this game, so everything is down for myself. So what we can do to ensure that we're in control, but the director of football is going out to find the stars using those really high ratings they've got, is to come into this one. So negotiating players, initiating, and then finalizing. If we delegate that and delegate that, but leave this one to ourselves, Big Iristain is going to go out there, find the players, initiate it, potentially talk about contracts, and then come to us to say, I've got this player and we've got full control of it. Now, depending how you play the game, if you're a control freak, do it all. Don't get me wrong. But if you are doing this in the most efficient way ever, I would suggest adding these and doing it for a few more. So incoming offers. So if an offer comes into a player that we've put on the unwanted list that we're trying to sell, our director of football will take over everything, but once again, we're the ones in control to finalize it. And we can even do that for the under 21s. Once again, those coming in, those going out, and even as low down as the under 18s. With the director of football and the role they've got and the abilities they've got, because at this stage you've recruited the correct one, this is a very wise choice. So we've confirmed that our director of football will do everything, but we're going to be the final sign-off. And that doesn't stop us doing all the searching ourselves. All of this is in addition to. This doesn't stop you going looking for players. All it means is that your director of football is going to be active and it's going to be efficient, finding more players on top of the ones that you are. Now, I was going to add another one in for contracts, but I am a control freak. I like to make sure that I keep the players in here, and there's no real option to make sure that you're the one finalizing it. So contract discussions, if I do delegate that, then the director of football will do everything and just come along to say, that player you wanted to get rid of, well, here's his 5-year contract and £200,000 a week. No, thank you. Because some players you want to get rid of, and that takes us nicely on to the 3rd tip, and that is using the director of football to get rid of dead wood. So within our club, if we wanted to get rid of a player, now let's take a player who's very dispensable for Manchester City, as in Erling Haaland, for example. We're going to come up here to transfer and add to unwanted list. And this is where our director of football can really help out. So we want to sell for value. Click on that one, and this will say your director of football will attempt to sell Erling Haaland. It does give you what the asking price is, and you can amend that. You can sell for whatever you want. You can change it to that. But if you want to go for value 227, for half value 114, and any price is automatic, so they're just going to come in with an open bid, so to speak. And to be fair, that's probably a good option, or sell or release, which we're not going to do. You can put it on hold and you can then start negotiations to make sure that it is active, and you can even put an expiry date on there. So for example, if it was the last week of the transfer window and you didn't want to sell a player beyond that, you could put some limitations in place. So this is now Erling Haaland up for sale by our director of football. Moving on to number 4 is getting them involved quite heavily in scouting and youth development. I know youth development is a curveball because that is your head of youth development, but as a director of football, generally that's what they do in their role. Now within scouting, I get my director of football to handle the scouting meetings. It doesn't mean that our chief scout isn't involved, it just means that there's a more varied approach to it. And because the director of football generally has the highest stats in those judge and player potential and ability, I want those to run the meeting. And in addition to that, within the advice and the reports, so the ones you get coming through every week, every month, or whatever you choose for the staff meetings, within that you get information on recruitment, player development, youth development, etc, etc. Once again, I like to get the director of football involved a lot more. Certainly within the recruitment, scouting feedback I leave to the chief scout, but with youth development information, I am getting the director of football involved with that, simply on a first team basis to get the players coming through at that level. And in addition to all of that, there's a really nice way to get them for the scouting element to find you some players. So we're going to come to the transfers tab, come up to director of football, and this will give you almost a hub for all the activity you can steer them towards. So let's not forget, he's going to be doing a lot of the work off his own back, but we can ask him to suggest some transfer targets. So let's assume Mr. Haaland is off to Arsenal for 30 mil and I want him to get a striker in. We can ask him to suggest a striker on transfer as well as loan. We can ask him to suggest some on loan, and as well as maybe ones who have ended their contract. Do that. Maybe not free transfer as it is the end of the season. Nope, there's none available. So we've got 5 players now that our director of football thinks would suit the club. Barbosa is number 1, bit of a drop down from Erling. Pedro is another one, another drop down from Erling. Richarlison is another one, another drop. You get the point. Jovic. So it's another way to boost your players that you can approach within the scouting network, and that comes under the transfer targets. As mentioned, the unwanted list, this is where Erling will appear, and anybody you put on the unwanted list, this is where they will appear, and there could be a list of them and you can tweak to your heart's content. There is a development list here, which is the main reason the director of football gets involved with youth development, and I'll show you that now. Pop down to the development center, we're going to go up to our under 21 squad, and we'll look at some of the best potential players here who aren't on loan. So Magatia, who loves a loan, we're going to come in here, add to development list, and this is a much better way than just saying he's available for loan, because what you can do is cater exactly to what you want. So on all his wages paid, I want him to be an important player. That club has to have great training facilities so he's going to develop nicely. I don't mind what club or nation he goes to, and as a central midfielder or an attacking midfielder, that's where I want him to play. Usually they'll come in with a specific role, but if you can give them some options, it opens up a wider net for you to get that player developed in the right club. I would do this for all the players you want on loan, by the way, because it is so essential to make sure they get it right. Obviously options you can add in, but that is it. So he is now underway, and as mentioned, you want to come down to transfers, go to our director of football hub, development list, you'll have McAtee in there. So all of your players on loan that are available will appear down here under the ownership of our director of football. This is why I mentioned it's important for him to be involved in youth development, because you cannot do this with a head of youth development. It doesn't give you the options to cater it to this level. And tip number 5, the final one, is the biggest time-saving tip I can give you. Under responsibilities, come up to staff, and we're going to get our director of football to renew all the contracts for the staff. At this stage, we've chosen them. We've already got them in place and recruited our staff. All we're asking him to do is to make sure they're continually employed by us. The top 2 we can't do. If you delegate this one, it will come up with the chairman and some of the directors in place, so we can't get these 2 done. So we'll keep those ourselves, but for these ones down below, delegate for director of football. And if you don't know, there is a button up here, set all to director of football, and it will do them all for you, aside from some of the ones that we want to keep ourselves. Once again, I would go all the way down there and give them all to director of football, set them all. It just means that this will all be done automatically. If you get to the stage where some of your staff want to leave and maybe there is a gap under like the technical side of things and you want to replace them, do that. You can still override it. All of this is in addition to the good work that you're going to be doing. Use your director of football to save you time. It is a wonderful, wonderful resource. And that's it. That's your 5 tips how to maximize the director of football in Football Manager 24. Comment down below if there's any you would add to the list. This is going to be the start of a mini-series where we look at the key staff in the game and teach you ways in which you can maximize their potential to make your enjoyment of the game continue. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that, watch this one and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.